Hi, Libby here. This is a little movie for Owen. I worked with Owen last week. Sorry it took me so long to get this out, but what I noticed for Owen was he's got pretty good mobility, but we could do a little better, especially he's very, very, very tight through the low back and the hips. It was really difficult for him to sit straight-legged on the floor. When he sits straight-legged on the floor, he is kind of like this. He can't really get all the way up onto his sit bones. So the tension basically from here to here is pretty high. And we also noticed that a little bit of the overhead range and ability to kind of move arms, as there's some tightness in his shoulders. So the exercises that I think might be useful for him to start with would be the double calf stretch, which I'm going to show here in a minute, and the cat suit stretch, which I'm also going to show you here. And there are a whole variety of other ways we can do some of these stretches, but I think these are pretty low impact. So because his foot is smaller, I show the calf stretch often on half domes, which we have at the gym, and I'm sure you could borrow one if you wanted to. But for his foot size, that's probably a little bit too high. So something like a rolled up yoga mat, or a rolled up bath mat, or a towel that has some give and is not as high is going to be better for his foot size. So that looks like this. He's going to put one foot up, so the top of the foot is elevated over the heel, and then keep the leg straight with the hip loaded over the heel and not over the front of the foot. And then if that's stretch or no stretch, doesn't matter, it's just more position we're interested in. He can even have his foot front, his other foot forward, that's fine, as long as the pull isn't too great on the back of the leg. Or if he's losing his balance, this foot is out too far. So if you see him kind of trying to get his balance, the opposite foot is out too far, and it might need to just be back further. Both sides. And then the double calf stretch looks like the same, but with both feet up. And you add to that the hips moving backward. And this is where he's really tight. So I'm going to see if I can get far enough away here to show this in the camera. He may have a tendency to want to do that kind of like this. So to make that bend at the hips, in other words, from here, you would want to send the hips back and just let the upper body fall. But because he's tight and there's not a lot of range of motion, the body likes to try to exaggerate those movements. He may want to do his hip hinge instead like this to feel like he's kind of got more movement. We don't want to do that. We want to keep the ribs in line with the hips. So when he hip hinges, the ribs kind of just don't do a whole lot. The hips move back and the upper body lowers without doing this or without sort of exaggerating the curve. So that is, again, just hips back, ribs stay tucked in, and the legs go straight but not locked. So these quads should be relaxed. I don't have anything under the front of my foot here, but you can at least see my hips a little better. So, and then you're just adding elevation to the front of the foot to increase the stretch here. So part of that is we want him to learn how to separate pelvic movement from back movement. So the next exercise then, the cat suit stretch, is you're going to elevate him probably more than I'm going to show here, because as I recall, we had to elevate him pretty high to get him pretty comfortable in cat suit stretch. But I'll show it this way. So put him up on some bolstering, some pillows or cushions. His sit bones go up. His feet go all the way against something flat. So he can't plantar flex and come out of the stretch. And then you're looking that he wouldn't be rounded like this with his pelvis kind of tucked. that he can get all the way up so that these bones at the front of the hips, the front of the pelvis, are loaded over the pubic bone. And then he would just hang out here and maybe read for a minute or two or something. And then he might as well sit this way for a little while. He could even sit kind of relaxed. But as you can see, these bones at the front of my pelvis are kind of forward. They're not back here, and I'm not rounded this way with my pelvis tipped back. I have my pelvis all the way upright, and then I'm tipped. So that's really what we're trying to get, is for him to be able to find this neutral pelvis instead of this sort of tipped pelvis. So those two stretches for the backs of the legs would be really good for him. And then just shoulder mobility to start with. So this is called protraction, reaching forward where the shoulder blades kind of move forward on the rib cage. And then this is called retraction, where you draw the shoulder blades back together. So just practicing some protraction and retraction. And then external rotation with that. So turning the palms and trying a little bit of that movement. He could also try from here, just external rotation, and you're looking for this shoulder to relax instead of for something like this to happen. You don't want that. And I think I showed in the wall stretch. So the wall stretch goes like this. Palm goes all the way to the wall, and the fingers are spread wide on the wall. Middle finger is directly up, and then I'm gonna make sure I straighten my arm, and that this soft part of my elbow, the elbow pit, I'm gonna call it, as opposed to the elbow tip, is facing the ceiling. And then I'm gonna push the wall away, like I have to hold the wall up, and then I'm gonna turn and look the opposite direction. I'm gonna turn back, and I could rotate in small increments and do maybe 5 or 6, but I'm just gonna do 3 here to show you. So middle finger up, middle finger facing all the way back, palm is still open wide. I'm gonna straighten my arm again, hold the wall up, make sure my shoulder doesn't do this, and turn and walk. Look away, hold for, I don't know, 5, 10, 15 seconds, turn back, and then I'm gonna turn my hand all the way down, middle finger down, elbow pit up, shoulder low, push the wall away, turn and look the other way. So both arms, obviously. Those are not specifically shoulder exercises, but I noticed that we have really tight shoulders. Usually there's a lot of tension in the hands and the forearms, and that was true for Owen as well. So those are just a few of the exercises I think he should start with. He just, I think, needs a little more shoulder mobility. So if he likes climbing, climbing trees, climbing ropes, if you ever go to climbing gyms, overhead pulling movements, monkey bars, those kinds of things, those are great for creating better shoulder mobility. And in a child, that should be able, he should be able to regain a lot of shoulder mobility very quickly through play. If he is interested in doing some climbing things, or pulling exercises, I don't know, games, you know, like tug of war, things where there are pulling involved, those would also be good shoulder mobility and strength exercises. But varying his movement in general would be good. Seated positions, again, if you see that he sits a lot with his pelvis tucked, which I'm pretty sure he does, mostly probably because, you know, kids have to sit in school so much and stuff. This is not a really good position, so varying his seated position where he can get his sit bones right under him, get upright over his pelvis, get his pelvis in neutral. Sitting on the floor is a really good habit. Changing position often in seated positions is a good habit, so you're not always inhabiting the same movement pattern. Varying his movement pattern more and more would be best. So those are the tips I have for him, and if you have any other questions or any questions about any of the exercises or any of the thought process behind them, please let me know. All right.